Nick will be about 5 minutes late, about 10 minutes late, so we can probably start.
I'd like to call this joint meeting between the City Council and Planning Commission to order. Chair Pedroza, I'd like to turn everything over to you right away. So
Thank you, and I'll call this the Planning Commission meeting to order. Thank you. So we're going to do welcome and introductions from the side. I'm sorry. My mic.
Oh no, sorry, Vice Mayor Bublak, you're on the speaker. Can you hear me?
I am, but barely can hear you.
All right, we'll speak up, and if you want to put yourself on mute, that'd be great. All right.
Okay, thank you. So, City Council members, thank you and welcome to this meeting. I appreciate you having us at this joint meeting. We're going to do introductions starting from my left, please. My right, my other left.
Yeah.
Thank you, my other left. And I'm Victor Pedroza.
Elvis Diaz.
And Nick Hackler will be here in a few minutes, if he's not walking up the steps as we speak. Okay? Item number 3 is public participation. It's limited to items described in the notice for this meeting. This time is set aside for members of the public to directly address the commission on any items of interest to the public before or during the commissioner's consideration of them. And pardon me, I have a cold. That is written and the subject matter and jurisdiction of the commission. You will be allowed 5 minutes for your comments. If you wish to speak regarding an item on the agenda, you may be asked to defer your remarks until the commission addresses that matter. Planning Commission Chair, staff, and updates? We have none. And Commissioners Forum, Planning Commission, we have the downtown parking plan workshop, please, and that will be Ms. Quintero.
And while you're passing the mic, I'm just going to formally say it for the clerk. This is going to be the time set aside for declaration of conflicts of interest and disqualifications. We didn't have it listed, but I don't see any on the Planning Commission, and I see none at the Council. All right. No, we added it. Yeah, thanks.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the Council, and members of the Commission. Thank you for this opportunity to have a joint meeting. This is not an action item that's before you. This is just a kind of workshop, informational type meeting. We were looking to get your feedback as we're working through preparing this plan. So we're going to have our consultants give a presentation. They've done data collection on parking counts in the downtown, so want to have them share with you their findings in the data collection and some of the preliminary recommendations that are coming forward. We are working to develop the draft plan, and we wanted to check in with both of your bodies here to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So this item will come back to you. The draft plan will go to the Planning Commission for another opportunity for a public hearing, and then we'll come back to the Council for a formal adoption. So I'd like to introduce and call up our consultants with TJM Transportation Consultants. This is Nyan, and he will be giving the presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity for public comment and then for your feedback.
Good evening, everyone. As Katie mentioned earlier, the objective of the meeting is to get a feedback from the council, commission, and the community on the preliminary findings and some options how to effectively manage parking within downtown Turlock. Brief agenda for today is provide an overview, the data collection as a part of this project, what are the findings based on the data collection and the community outreach, and some of the preliminary recommendations and what are the next steps. Background, since 1970, the Turlock population has grown fivefold, and it has brought many challenges to the city infrastructure in terms of traffic flow, congestion, safety for all modes of transportation, as well as parking. And the city staff and the leadership has successfully managed these challenges. To ensure that the parking supply within the downtown area does not become a constraint for the current and the future businesses, in September of 2015, the council adopted 2015-2019 policy goals and implementation plan within downtown Turlock. Brief background on the policy goals and implementation, which says that we need to prepare a downtown parking plan to identify the strategies, infrastructure improvements, and funding needed. And the general plan of City of Turlock also calls out for improving downtown parking opportunities. As a part of, in order to meet the city objectives and goals, City of Turlock initiated a project which was named Downtown Parking Plan, and the objective of the project was to collect existing parking supply, demand, and current utilization data. What are the current policies and alternatives that can be developed to utilize the existing infrastructure in terms of parking? What are the future growth and parking demands projected for 2030 and beyond? What are the financing options for implementing some of the recommendations? And what are the parking solutions? With the funding constraints, we were also being asked to develop a phased parking program that can be implemented over a number of years to effectively manage the parking supply. As a part of the project, what we did is we broke down the entire downtown Turlock into 3 different zones. The ones in the blue color is the core downtown area. The one in teal is on the outskirts of downtown or where some of the downtown facilities are located, and zone 3, which is identified in the gray, is the existing city parking surface lots. As a part of the existing conditions, we collected extensive inventory throughout the study area, also collected occupancy and duration during weekdays and weekends. Extensive outreach was conducted where we had community meetings, we had a website developed for the project, and at the same time, we also implemented the online survey. So based on the data collected, what we have within downtown Turlock, we have approximately 3,872 parking spaces, out of which about approximately 3,200 parking spaces are unmarked, and the rest of the parking spaces, they are basically timed-based parking slots or parking spaces along the streets. Out of the total inventory, we also identified or collected that there are about 44 ADA compliant parking spaces throughout the downtown area. This slide, it illustrates basically the occupancy on a weekday around 10 a.m. and as it illustrates, some of the streets identified or the blocks identified in red color is basically where the occupancy is almost at 100%. And then the one in orange is approximately somewhere between 85 to 95%, and then 70 to 85% where it's identified yellow. But most of the area outside of the core downtown, there is a lot of parking supply. It's not to that max capacity or demand exist on those streets or blocks. This slide illustrates basically the weekday occupancy around 4 p.m. And one of the key findings as a part of the data collection or the analysis of the data that was collected, what we found that approximately about 138 out of the 800 parking spaces, they were occupied for more than 6 hours. And this is one of the important findings because this is an area where we have a time-based parking available. So it was a non-compliance with the parking limits on those blocks or on those streets. This slide identifies the occupancy broken down by zone, and as you can see it, at any given point, whichever zone we look at, the occupancy is not exceeding 50% than what the supply is there within the downtown. This slide identifies the data that was collected and analyzed on a weekend around 7 p.m. Lot of parking available again on a weekend too. We conducted online survey, and what we really thank the community for responding or taking participation in the online survey. And what we found was we received about 157 responses. 65% of it was from the local residents, 14% were visitors, and 10% of it was business owners. And based on the survey, what we received, what 51% of them identified that the purpose of them making a trip to a downtown was either for dining or entertainment purposes. 28% was either for shopping or doing errands, and 14% was related to work or businesses. 91% of those trips were done by auto, 6% by walk, and 2% by bike. What did we ask in the survey? Some of the questions what we asked was, where do you park? How far do you park from your destination? Which parking lot you try to use it? And what we found was that 38% of them identified that they would prefer to park in the same block where the destination was. We also asked them the knowledge about the 12 downtown public parking lots, and 50% of them identified they were aware of some, but not all of them. And about 20% of them identified that they were aware of it. So a lot of the respondents, on an overall, they are not aware of the surface parking lots what the city owns within the downtown area. On the willingness to walk, 45% of them responded that they are willing to walk 2 blocks, which is a good walking distance, and a comfortable too. We also asked them where do they park when they don't find a space within 1 block of their destination. Approximately 38% said that they keep on circling until they find a space within the block of their destination. What does it result into? Unnecessary trips on the surface streets, right? It increases congestion and also can impact the safety. We also asked them to rank what could be the reason for the drivers not to park more than 1 block away. Most of them, or the majority of them, mentioned that the condition of the sidewalk was not in a good shape, or there was a lacking of street lighting. The second major response, what we got, was lack of interest in walking. We also asked them which of the following strategies would they support in the downtown area. More than 50% of them responded saying that no change, keep free parking at the curb and lots and garages, and about 32% of them said that they would prefer paid parking at the curb while having a free parking at the lots and garages what the city owns. What does the data and the online survey reflected was that downtown Turlock is full of vibrant activities. There is a low turnover, high duration parking conditions along Main Street, Olive, Center, and Broadway, and public lots are underutilized. As a part of the study, we also conducted within the downtown area a future parking demand based on the growth what's identified in the City of Turlock general plan. And what we found, looking at this chart over here, represents a total demand that would exist combined in 2016, 2030, and 2032. And what we found was that if we look at the entire downtown area, which includes all the 3 zones, zone 1, 2, and the surface parking lots, we are going to be somewhere close to 50% occupancy by 2030. This slide or chart also illustrates broken down by zones. And what we can see is that zone 3, which happens to be the city parking lots, they are going to have the maximum demand by 2030. And then what we did is we also broke down by individual zones into sub areas. And what we found that zone 1, which is the core downtown along Main Street, is going to hit a higher occupancy or demand of more than 80% by 2030. That's the time when the city needs to start considering or taking into account future plans, what needs to be implemented on a long-term basis, which would include, do we need to provide more parking spaces? Do we need to build a parking garage, or do we need to construct new surface parking lots? Based on the analysis, we develop recommendations which are preliminary, and based on the feedback what we received today from the council as well as the commission, this would be altered, modified, or fine-tuned. We broke it down into 3 different time periods. The near term, less than 4 years, what can be done. A short term, which is basically looking between year 5 and 10, and a long term on a 10 to 20 year basis. Near term, we identified improvements which can be effective, easy to implement, and it's going to be implemented at a lower cost. Short term is looking at new technologies and comprehensive traffic demand management. And then long term, when parking is at capacity, which is going to be a high ticket items, that is going to be difficult to be implemented immediately. The recommendations were broken down into physical improvements, parking management, and increasing the supply. Under near term, some of the key recommendations what we identified was physical improvements, change in the parking time limits, compliance, adopting an employee parking permit program, and publicizing the parking lots. The pros of it aligns with the city's vision of the downtown, supported by the design guidelines which are existing, permanent improvements benefiting other modes of transportation. The cons is the capital expenditure and no immediate results due to the long construction periods in comparison to the other effective measures. Recommendation is to improve the east-west crosswalks on Golden State, improve store frontage and lighting on the side streets, and explore the planned beautification projects and funding sources throughout the downtown area. Some of the physical improvement what are identified include sidewalk improvements, street lighting, landscaping, wheelchair ramps, high visibility crosswalk to enhance the pedestrian safety, providing lighting within the surface parking lots as well as landscaping, and developing a pedestrian-oriented store frontages. Changing the 4-hour time limit to 2-hour max, what are the benefits of it? It's projected to increase the parking supply for the short-term duration, discourages commuters and employees from long-term parking. The cons is the employees would be forced to find off-street parking areas. This slide, I want to revisit it. As I mentioned earlier, that out of the 800 parking spaces, we found that 138 parking spaces were occupied for more than the duration than what they should be. And in order to overcome that, what we are proposing or recommending is compliance, enhancing the compliance of the parking within the downtown area. The pros to this measure is going to increase the turnover and parking supply for short-term parking needs. It's going to encourage the compliance of parking and other regulations. It also enhances the safety within the downtown area. Increases the supply at very minimal cost. The cons is going to be the initial program implementation and coordination, requires ongoing staffing, resources, and equipment, requires parking ticket contestation process, and recommendations are to allocate dedicated staff for parking enforcement, implement on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and set aside citation revenues to fund the enforcement program. Some of the options how compliance can be enforced: chalking of the tires, there are automated systems depending on the funding, what can be implemented. The fourth recommendation is to implement employee permit parking. And the pros, the biggest advantage is that employees would have designated areas where they can go and park for a long-term durations. They won't have to worry about moving their vehicles from one parking slot to another or a parking space to another. It also frees up right in front of a business, the parking space that's going to be available. The cons is going to be that the city would have to implement the program. They would have to determine a permit issuance and management cost. There's going to be permit fees for the employees associated or for the businesses. Our recommendation is to issue employee parking permit at a minimum in Zone 2, which is right in front of the Bank of America and the U.S. Post Office building, where we have found that the maximum violation occurs in that area. Publicizing the parking lots, how we can do it, we need to install more wayfinding signs. We can look into having the parking surface lots and real-time parking occupancy on the city website. Having flyers for the downtown associations and announcing the surface parking lots at the events. And at the same time, we can also think about or consider having window stickers for the businesses. Some ways or examples of how some cities have implemented publicizing the parking lots. Some nice looking signs to enhance, at the same time maintain the feeling or the environment of the downtown area. Some examples of how we can have it on the website. Some cities within the Bay Area or other jurisdictions, they have implemented. Example of having it on the city website, the information on parking in downtown area. Some of the preliminary recommendations where this sign should be implemented. They have been identified on the slide, and I believe in the staff report or the handouts what you might have it. On a near term, we need to look at transportation demand management, smart parking meters, real-time parking availability, phone apps, and pay-by-phone options. Transportation demand management is basically targeting to reduce the parking demand. How can we, what are the options to be explored is enhancing the pedestrian and bicycle facilities, promote other modes of transportation, assess the demand and then motorcycle parking as appropriate. That was one of the feedback what we got at one of the community outreach meeting. Promote the transit ridership and encourage carpool, vanpool, and for the employees, encourage telecommuting too. Challenges, availability of the funds to support the enhanced infrastructure, and what our recommendations are in order to, with the cost involved in implementation of some of these measures, it would take some time. So our recommendation is explore these options for in the midterm to long term as a solution. Examples of a smart parking meters, real-time parking availability signage, phone apps, and pay-by-phone options. Long-term surface parking lots needs to be built, or the other option is multi-level parking garages within the downtown area. The differences between the surface parking lots and the multi-level parking garages, it provides you a side-by-side comparison of the cost, the ongoing operations and maintenance cost on annual basis or monthly basis. The pros of surface parking lots is high initial cost but low ongoing expenses and minimal construction involved in it. They are found to be less efficient. Use of land, availability of sites in the downtown is going to be rare, and cost of land acquisition. If we move forward with the multi-level parking garages, they are going to be the more efficient use of land within the downtown area. It has a high initial cost and ongoing expenses, heavy construction, and availability of the sites in downtown, as well as the cost of land acquisition is going to be a challenge. Next steps, as Katie mentioned earlier, based on the feedback what we get today, we're going to be revising our recommendations and options and Katie would be bringing this back to the commission and eventually to the council for adoption. With that, I would like to thank everyone and open it up for any questions you might have it for me.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation, and I'm sure we have a few questions. I know I have a couple, and I'll defer to my other commissioners first, and then I'll come back to myself last. So I open it up for questions from commissioners. Go ahead.
First off, I'll apologize for being late. So, catching into the conversation of the parking, I came in a little bit late, but there seems to be actually more parking in downtown than I actually ever anticipated. I don't know if people felt that way by his numbers. I didn't think there was 800 spots downtown Turlock. So, is that something that, not a question, but more of a thought process of that? Using downtown, being a citizen in Turlock forever, that maybe there's more parking than we actually initially anticipated, or is that something that maybe just where you pulled those lots from, and if you can maybe go into that a little bit further detail.
So the total number of parking, what we counted in downtown area is about 3,800 parking spaces.
Oh, 3,800.
If we look at the entire study area, including the surface parking lots, we have 3,800, out of which only 35% is utilized as of today.
I think being a citizen of Turlock, I feel like maybe that there's only 5. So it just feels that way.
And you're absolutely right about that one. That's what you're gonna feel if you're going to be on Main Street. Or some areas where the demand is there, but there is no compliance with the parking time limits. There are parking spaces which have a parking time limits where you're supposed to be parked only for 2 hours, and going back to that 800 versus 138, that's what I was trying to highlight, that out of 800 at 138 locations, people were parked or vehicles were parked for more than 6 hours instead of 2 hours. So the problem is.
So
in
my
the
5 spots
compliance.
that I think that we have are actually being used all day,
That's
basically.
correct. You might be one of them.
Probably not, but maybe. But no, it just is something that kind of opened my eyes, because I felt like if you had asked me 5 years ago that we weren't even close to a parking garage conversation. And then over this last few years, it seems like we went from having spots downtown to feeling like we have none at all times. And the information that you brought forward is something that is education to me. So I just want to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
There was something you had on there in reference to that there was no that out of the questionnaire, I believe it was the questionnaire, that no one uses transit to downtown.
That's correct.
Do we have accessibility to it?
I'm sorry?
Is there, are there stops downtown that aren't being utilized? Is that?
Yes. There are transit routes as well as transit stops within the downtown area.
I think there's one right in front of the, right across from Chamber of Commerce. Is that one's still being utilized there?
On Golden,
That's
on Golden State.
there.
But this survey, the results what we presented is based on the responses what we got to the survey. So there might be some users who might be using the transit to access downtown area, but they might have not responded
They
to the
didn't
survey.
respond.
Right.
And then, is it kind of concluding that those 6-hour plus usabilities of those certain spots that are being used for more than 6 hours is because of employee parking? Is that a good assumption?
It's a good
or-
assumption.
This is more for Chief Jackson. I think I would say maybe a year and a half ago, we did a little enforcement on the timed parking spaces along Main Street. Is that, maybe you can just give us a little history on, because I think you
Sure.
did a little enforcement and then we backed off on it. And if you
Yeah.
could just give us a little bit of
Am I on?
information on that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the opportunity to address the enforcement portion of it. And to go back even further than that, I think it's important to talk about how we've gotten to the point where we're at with our enforcement strategies. And one of the things we did back in around 2011, through the businesses, there were some complaints about too much enforcement. So the strategy was switched to a by complaint enforcement type activity rather than having somebody assigned to dealing with parking enforcement proactively. And that was handled by a CSO at the time. So that position was reallocated elsewhere in the department, mostly at the request of businesses as far as them not wanting as much parking enforcement because customers were complaining about parking tickets. So that's why the strategy changed. Absolutely, if we want to hold people accountable to the hours of parking, we can switch back to an enforcement method of proactive enforcement. But then again, we run the risk of businesses not being happy with the parking tickets. Not too many people enjoy getting a parking ticket. So that's a policy decision. We can do that. We would have some challenges in the department. That position, one of the CSO positions, which was the community service officer position, non-sworn, handled that responsibility in the past, assigned to the traffic division. And back in 2008, we did remove a CSO position from our ranks. So we are one down from those numbers. So ideally, we'd have another CSO fill that spot again, which we could re-implement a parking enforcement strategy where it's proactive. And we could probably do that with staffing that we have now, but we'd have to pull them from somewhere else, some other duties that they have. So, it's more of a combined direction of council telling us which way you'd like that enforced, and we could do either way.
Chief, did you keep that position in your budget? So is it still there? That CSO position?
No, back in 2008, it was removed from. Yeah. But at the time, in 2008, it wasn't specifically directed to traffic. After that position was removed, we reallocated after the decision was made not to be an enforcement, that CSO that was still assigned to traffic was reallocated to another assignment.
The original enforcement, was it just 9 to 5, or was it?
It was mostly during the day. Now we'd have other, the staff that was specifically assigned to parking enforcement, she was a CSO assigned to traffic. So her hours were during the day. We also had the opportunities to enforce it later, but that turned more into a complaint issue, like when people complain about lack of parking. And, and the demand changes as well, because there wasn't as many, there's more available parking spots a couple of years ago downtown, so there wasn't a real big issue as far as complaints. So that was another part of the strategy as far as going to complaint-based.
Chief, do you know off the top of your head what the cost of a time violation ticket is?
Not a lot. I think it's $25, $30. Yeah. It's 40? Okay. So,
I was just going to say,
It's 40.
if you stopped enforcing in 2008, that must have been right after I got mine.
Did you get one? Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of
so-
people got them,
yeah.
and it did modify the parking behaviors of
Right.
people, but
Yeah, and it was,
Yeah.
I think it started out at 40, and then it had a scale. If you didn't pay it in time, it went up and went
yeah,
up and went up. So,
definitely.
so, okay. Any other questions for the chief?
Any questions or comments from the council? Yeah, Councilman Nascimento.
In terms of what tools or resources do we have available? I mean, not just personnel. I mean, how would we do it? We just talk about chalking tires and going back and checking.
Yeah, that's how we normally do it, is we go around and do it on a time and based on the time of the parking. And there's different time limits throughout the downtown area. So we would chalk it and do those type of strategies, and it worked pretty well. One of the challenges is you have competing interests where some businesses in the same footprint area want short-term parking, others want longer-term parking, and it also seemed to be a little bit of the dramas too as far as figuring out what is best for that specific area. And different areas throughout downtown want shorter or longer periods, which we can accommodate, but that was a little bit of the issues as well as far as getting everybody on the same page.
Do you recall was the majority of it sort of violations on Main Street or right off of Main? Does that seem to be sort of the main issue?
Main and also right in front of City Hall with some issues as well. People sitting there too long, but it just spread out throughout there. And specifically, I don't recall which ones were more than others.
And then, do you know, did the citations? Was your experience of the citations would actually cover the cost of that CSO position, or?
It covered quite a bit of it, yeah. And one of the issues we have, it's not just covering the cost of the CSO, but it's actually using that that employees' time. If you think about the city of Turlock, the only area that has a real traffic control area where we'd have parking citations is the downtown area. We don't have any other areas where we have a lot of activity, unlike the college where they have a lot of parking enforcement there based on campus. So that was a strategy. So we'd have that traffic CSO also do other things to assist the traffic unit as well on times when parking enforcement wasn't used.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for the commission? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions about, you mentioned there were 44 ADA slots in Turlock. Does that meet the need, or is that meet, well, let me restate that. Number one, does it meet the need, or do you have any feedback on that? And number two, are there ADA requirements as to how many parking slots we need?
We haven't looked that in specific, the areas where the ADA requirements are or where needed, but we will definitely look into it.
Okay, the other question I had was, on parking, you talked about multi-level parking garage. Have you talked about subsurface underground parking, or considered underground parking? How does that compare to above ground?
We haven't looked into underground parking. We have only looked between a multi-story parking garage versus surface lots.
Okay.
And one of the main reasons why we haven't looked into underground parking is because of the maintenance. As you go underground, the maintenance cost keeps on going up, and that's gonna be a recurring on an annual basis.
More so than above ground, multi-level?
That's correct.
All right. Very good. Any other questions? I think in closing my comments, I think answer Nick's question, signage is a big issue, I think. There are a lot of parking spots downtown. People are hesitant to walk, more than a couple blocks, but I think we had more signs that would improve that at least the information portion of that, and give them an option to go around. I'm one of those people that you talked about, that I go to PG&E, and if there's not a slot in front of there, I go around, one or two times, and then I go across the street to a
It's
private
not
parking
only
lot.
you.
So, but
I
yeah,
do the same
no,
thing.
But I understand that. But if you go around the block, there's just, it doesn't appear to have
That's
a
true.
parking spots where I want to be.
Yeah.
Anyway, any other comments, questions?
Are there any questions or comments from the public? I think on that last note, going back to Allison's crew, actually this is something we talked about a year ago and they actually implemented. We actually do have quite a few free public parking signs around. I think those speaks to the need to make those fit in but also stand out at the same time. So that's something we need to explore more, perhaps with the TDPOA, and try and get them on board as well.
Okay.
So, any other questions or comments from the council? All right, I don't see any. You're still driving.
I'm still in the driver's seat, huh? Very
Yeah.
good. Thank you very much for that presentation. And is this going to be posted on the website so people can see the results of the survey?
Katie? Yes.
Okay, very good. And this is very good information, by the way. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Commissioners' comments, any comments from the commission, please? Anything, anybody have anything else to say?
Any, oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I would just say if the council decides to take on the sort of enforcement part of it, that, as you know, when you walk Main Street, you see the no parking signs right now. We still have a majority of those that say no parking on Thursdays between, and obviously no one pays, follows those directions, but that's due to I think the past farmers market years ago that was closed on Thursday night. So we had this discussion a while ago about updating those no parking signs, and and so I would just say if we're going to move forward with that we really get serious about making sure those are all accurate before we enforce anything, because that's part of the problem when the enforcement. Well, about a year and a half ago, we got out and tried to enforce a little bit, but the signs weren't quite accurate with what we were trying to enforce, and so we ran into some complications there.
Absolutely, and I think that it speaks to how we're handling water conservation right now. I think this council goes to education first before enforcement, so we would try and get people to understand what the areas are, what's 4 hours, what's 2 hours, before we go back to the big stick of actually fines. But yeah, I agree with you. So any council comments? I do want to make sure we dispel one rumor in the community. We are not approving metered parking tonight. That is not something we are doing. It is not. So the Turlock Journal that's watching from wherever, we are not approving metered parking. I've heard that a few times. So with that,
Mr. Mayor, I just have one final question for you. I know what is the timeline, and in the global sense of implementation of any of these? I know, are we looking at, looking at it for another, you're looking at it all year long and then try to evaluate more options? I know if we're gonna build a parking garage, it takes if it's gonna take us 15 years, or however long it takes. I think time goes by fast, and our need is gonna rise faster than our supply, apparently, according to that chart.
yeah, absolutely. And this fits in with our strategic plan that we've talked about. And I think that we owe, as a council and a staff, a timeline. So I'm looking towards the city manager and the staff to give you guys that timeline.
Perfect.
We'll work on that in the next 2 weeks. So hopefully by your next planning commission date, we can send you guys a letter as to what that's going to be. But there's also some things like I talked about. Director Van Gilder's staff did a great job of just getting together a group to saying, how can we try and highlight the current spots? And so they did their best attempt to put signs up, right?
Correct.
Within compliance and all those things. So there's certain things that we can do almost immediately to try and highlight the more spots, which then almost doubles or triples the amounts of spots overnight. It's just
I completely understand that, and we do need to highlight, we need to fully implement what we have now.
Mhm.
But as you very well know, it's not just building something, it's finding the funding for it,
Yeah.
and land allocation, and all that takes time, so.
Yeah, and-
That's what I'm talking about as far as timeline.
Absolutely, and we've had a lot of discussions are fairly loose about parking structures, about where other parking lots are going. We're renovating the parking lot across the street for storm drainage issues. That's this summer. So we're constantly looking at that. There's also a discussion to be had about what types of models, right? Public-private partnerships, completely public, completely private. What are we doing as far as those structures? Do we have housing units, retail involved? Is it just parking? So I think that that's something within that timeline the city manager identifies. I think we need
Very
to
good.
have a discussion about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I
Yes,
add one
yeah.
thing to that timeline, is that on some of the things that maybe could be really simple fixes,
Mhm.
as far as like striping, or maybe a new light, or maybe some of those
Mhm.
things that we actually go aggressive within
Yeah.
the timeline, that some of those things, as far as education is what they provide today, is they opened my eyes to realizing there's a lot more available downtown, that there could be some simple fixes that create, give us some time to build in something large.
I agree with you, and I think that this council is willing to go down the road of a few pilot projects or actions, right, where we
That'd
just
be
try
great.
something out. So yeah, Councilman DeHart.
One action for absolute certain, Nick, is that I'm willing to share my space if you'll share yours.
That's gonna be the headline of the.
Yeah, that's it right there, yeah.
Perfect.
Scooters, more scooters.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts, comments? Yes, Councilman Nasmo.
I'd say I agree with Commissioner Hackler. I think first step is utilization of the existing spaces we have and how to better utilize them. And I think we would phase it as it was proposed here, is that you would have 3 or 4 phases where here are all the things that we can accomplish in a short term, low cost. And when those things are done and we've exhausted all the benefit from that, then you start looking at the next phase. But I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is technology is evolving very quickly. 5 years ago, nobody was taking Uber downtown, and now a lot of folks have that availability. With the advent of autonomous vehicles and those kind of things, I mean, the demand model may shift significantly over the next 15 years. I mean, these things are happening very quickly, and so I think in the short term, we make the change, sort of the easy fixes. Because I was surprised to learn there were that many spaces downtown. Because you're right, when you're looking for one, it sure doesn't feel like there's that many there. And I think we have a responsibility, especially on Main Street, to really help those businesses turn over those spaces so that their customers can find a space when they need it. But again, we don't want to create a burden on their customers if they're getting a ticket every time they come downtown. They're not going to want to come down. So finding that balance, I think, is sort of the challenge that's before us, and we appreciate you guys chiming in your help on this.
Very good.
Final comments, questions?
Commissioners, final comments and questions? Okay, I think we're good here.
Perfect. Well,
Okay.
we really appreciate it. We enjoy these meetings because it gives us face time with you guys. We get your recommendations brought up to us, but you're this mysterious body, this commission that's making comments. No.
Well, you can always come to the meeting.
Actually, I don't think we can in our code of conduct. We're not supposed to attend them. So.
Stand outside the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no parking, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm teasing. No, we appreciate it.
Very good,
so
thank you.
much.
And it's always a pleasure to meet with the city council as well. Thank you
Absolutely.
very much.
All right. Well, with that, do you
And
wanna
we'll adjourn the planning commission meeting tonight. Thank you. All.
And we adjourn the city council meeting. I know they took a motion.
Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's parking miles.